Hello, here we are once again with Mookie Tenembaum. We are exploring through these videos his disillusionist philosophy. We are trying to understand the misalgic theory that explains human behavior as a result of our aversion to suffering. We are already in May 2022, as many of you already know. Video after video for this rather long exercise already, we've been trying to illustrate some of the concepts in these philosophies with facts from everyday life, with bits of news that we've been gathering. Some of our latest videos have to do with current affairs, like the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic, like the war in the Ukraine. But today we are going to take a step back and discuss a philosophical issue, which is the issue of identity, the problem of how we perceive ourselves, how others perceive us, and how we expect others to perceive us and to behave towards us. So we're going to take a look at this philosophical conundrum of sorts from a disillusionist point of view.
Well, when we speak about identity, the first thing we have to talk about is I know who I am. I mean, there is no need for me to make a decision if I feel a man or I feel a woman or I feel or I am a post office. It doesn't matter. Yes, I am myself, and that's enough. I know myself. I am knowing all the time of my selfity. It's not something that I need pieces to identify myself. It's not that, sometimes people say, in Spanish, they ask you how they call you. It's not they don't ask you what's your name, how you call it. Nobody call. I mean, how they call me, I don't know. I know how, or how do you call yourself? I don't call myself. I cannot call myself because I don't need. I'm here all the time. Now, this is not just a play with words and a play with concepts. It's just to understand that identity is only in front of others. It's never in front of yourself. You don't need identity to know who you are. And the idea is that you are going to explore who you are is really absurd. There is nothing to look. You know who you are. You are that person who is now feeling or who feels pain or suffers. Okay, suffering, it happens to me. If I'm a man, if I'm a woman, if I'm a horse, well, a horse no, or if I'm American or I'm Chinese, it's not going to change anything. But first, I wanted to introduce the concept of identity. If we're speaking about other people, let me take you from the collective point of view instead of the individual, just to understand. There is a concept. It's called the self-determination of a people. A people to a nation to decide that it's a nation under the international law, and we'll talk about the public international law, which I smile because there is no such a thing. But under those terms, under that script, you can a group of people can decide that they are a people. So the Palestinian people can decide they're Palestinian just because they decide so. I can think of many other. You can think maybe the people of Martha's Vineyard can decide that they are a people too. Yes, it's just a decision. It doesn't make sense from any point you would think about it. First of all, there is no such a thing as public international law, because to have a law, you need somebody to be able to enforce it. And lo and behold, anybody who's been looking lately at what's happening in Europe, you will see that the guy who has the guns does not respect what we call international law. Now, that means that any law has to be, behind it has to be a gun. There's a guy with a gun. We say sometimes that in any process, there is a guy with a sandwich. Behind any illusion, whatever it is, in this case, the Palestinian people or the Martha's Vineyard nation, if they have a gun, they are. Yes. So the United States of America declared independence. Why could they? Because they had enough guns, better guns than the British ones. Other countries that tried and did not succeed were never. Self-determination was not important. So this is self-determination of a people. Now, what happened when we talk about an individual? But before that, I want your opinion about about the other two issues.
I'm interested to get into the individual side of the matter, but I guess I know which way you're heading already, because you are turning this theoretical matter into a very practical one, I would say. When it comes to, if I have enough power, if I have enough force to impose upon you a certain recognition, a certain type of behavior or obligation, it's not important how I identify myself. It's not important how I feel about myself. What becomes important is if whether I am able or not to exert some recognition out of you. I see how this applies to situations in which Palestinians, North Americans, Catalonians, or Kelpers in the Falklands seek international recognition, but I'm also interested in understanding how it works between individuals in any community.
Well, I think we are now in front of the most interesting issue related to that is the trans issue. The people who change or who perceive themselves to have another sex. There is no argument that if a person thinks he's a woman, he's a woman. If he thinks he's a light post, he's a light post. I don't care. I mean, for itself, it's not important. When it matters, when that person comes to the others and says, this is how I feel, this is my identity, and you have to accept it. Now, if somebody comes to you and says, I'm a human being, probably he'll get away with it. Probably, most probably, I would say, he will get away with it because there is no argument about it. There is no issue. You are not asking anything beyond. Now, when you're saying, I'm a woman and you're a man, or you were born a man, or people think that you're a man or you have a beard, yes, and you say you are a woman, then there is certain rights that come attached to it. And but the interesting issue here is individually, when the only way I can get somebody else to change the way they see me is by effectively changing the way they see me. So, you know, we spoke, you remember, we were speaking about having an avatar, a little ambassador we always have in somebody else. So you have my avatar, Mookie, and when I'm not in front of you, that avatar has very few, I would say, qualities, some quality, different qualities, but not too much, because of course there is not enough definition in that avatar. It's enough for you to know, well, he's a good guy, or he's a big guy, or he talks, or he has a YouTube channel. I don't know. Whatever it's in your avatar. So I can always try to go into the avatar and try to convince you I'm a good guy. I'm thinner than you think. I can try on many things, but it is clear that beyond that, if I want to go one step beyond, I will need to be able to enforce it. Now, why I need to enforce it? Because I demand that you not only accept my identity, you will treat me with that identity. So if I'm a man and now I feel like a woman, you have to call me she. Why? Because I want. Now, let me tell you very simply that if I want and there is nobody to enforce it, then I won't. It will end there. And let me give you an idea, because here we're talking about sex, gender identity, but you have a race identity. I can think that I'm black, or I can think I'm American, then I'm entitled to an American passport. Or maybe I am 85 years old, and therefore I am entitled to have a ultra senior. I'm getting older, so it's going to be harder. For you, not for me. You can try to be a senior and pay less when you go into a movie theater. This is the point in which your rights are stepping on somebody else's toes. And the only way to do it is by having somebody to enforce it. What do you think, Florence?
You made me remember that this is sort of internal family myth amongst my ancestors. Apparently, this great grandfather of mine, who was very strong-willed and a very powerful figure, at least within the family, he didn't perceive himself as a grandfather, and he was able to enforce this not violently necessarily, but through economical means. And all his grandchildren called him relative. And they used the word relative, not grandfather. That grandfather was forbidden. And up to this day, my father, my uncles, their cousins, they speak about this grandfather of them in terms of relative. They would never use the word grandfather. So it was a shift in identity, a pretty ridiculous one, because he was their grandfather, but he got away with it, and he was able to enforce that for as long as he lived, and later even, because he's still called relative.
Well, what you are saying is the reason he could do it is because probably he had the checkbook. He was the guy with the checkbook, which in fact the checkbook will not be good enough if there would be somebody at the end of the whole process that be able to enforce it with a gun. There is always, at the end, there is a guy with a gun. Let me tell you an example. Russia has invaded Ukraine. Then they use some kind of veneer of any argument of identity, saying they are neo-Nazis and therefore we will invade. But this is not important. They have the tanks. They only more than a guy with a gun, no, Florencio. They have tanks. Let me give you an example, Florencio. The example that I will give you is Macedonia. Macedonia used to be one of the countries that came out of the division of Yugoslavia. The problem with Macedonia is there is a north province in Greece called Macedonia. And they say, no, sir, you cannot have the same name. I say, we can have whatever we want. We have an army. You cannot force it. Okay, we'll see. We'll see about it. And then when Macedonia tried to join NATO, Greece said, no, you can't join it if you don't change your name. So lo and behold, Macedonia changed its name to North Macedonia. So there was a gun, there was a threat of not of violence but of loss. Yes, and again, you can have people doing certain things because a religion doesn't need a gun. They just tell you you're going to go to hell. So if you don't believe in hell, then religion cannot do anything about it. But if you do, then going to hell is another way of enforcing this kind of identities. So identity really doesn't really exist. Now, everybody who thought that this conversation will be about the trans, their rights, and are they right, are they wrong? It's not important. The important thing is that in England, for example, there's a guy with a gun. If you don't call her she, you go to prison. In Canada, if you are in the university and you don't give it the pronoun the person wants, you are out of a job. Period. End of story. A guy with a gun. So at the end of this story is not about identity. It is always, as I said, the guy with a gun. You see, it's very important to understand disillusionism has no theoretical philosophy. It's all practical philosophy. There is no theory. There is, of course, a theory, and of course, the disillusionism, but it's about practice. It's not. And if evidence would be against what disillusionism poses, then disillusionism will change because it's an evidence-based philosophy.
Just one question before we are done, because we are almost out of time. But I wanted to ask you about these practical changes that we are seeing. I think the international name changing and independence movement is an interesting example, but this example about gender change and gender identity is also very good. I wanted to ask you about the impact of these practical changes on a central concept for the disillusionist theory, which is the concept of our sleepwalking, of our synchronized sleepwalking through life. What effect can this have on that?
Well, this is the main issue for disillusionism. Here we're not talking about identity. Here we're talking the possibility of me sleepwalking with your new identity or your perceived identity. So if somebody with a beard comes and says, call me she, it's going to be harder for me not to wake up every time I have to call her she. Oh, I remember, if I have to. So I have a problem. Now, if it's not only me, there's a lot of people having a problem, the whole sync starts having a problem. The fantastic thing, the best way to talk about the sync is is the highway. So in the highway, all the cars are fantastic. Why? Because everybody's sleepwalking. If somebody started having ideas, or then there is a problem. And if 5 or 10 of those people start having ideas, then it's the end of the highway. The highway will come up to a stop, to a grinding stop, and that's it. So the same thing, think about it, is going to happen in the day-to-day basis. If I have every time to think, sir, how do you want me to call you? So not only the name I have to remember, now I have to remember the pronoun that I'm going to call, which can be changed every 15 minutes.
Yeah.
And again, if as I said, if you identify as an American and you say, I am an American, even though I was born in Argentina, and I demand the passport, I don't have the gun. They do. I'm not going to get the passport. So
amazing. Thank you very much. We are more than done in terms of the hour. Thank you very much. See you next time, Mookie.
See you next time.
If you enjoyed the video, please like it, comment and subscribe.